Right, Year 12. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to plan a 24-mark question. And again, we're going to start off by analysing the mark scheme. You should be quite familiar with these front sheets by now. This is where your teacher will give you feedback on your essay. So let's look at the question. How successful were the Liberal social reforms in improving the lives of British people? 24 marks. Before we actually get into planning an answer to this question, I want us to think about the mark scheme. So again, you've got the level descriptors. You'll notice there's level 5 on a 24 marker, and again there's a place at the bottom for your teacher to write their comments. In a level 1, again it's descriptive, loosely linked to the question. There may be some explicit comment with little, if any, appropriate support, so it's lacking detail. There may be an awareness of different historical interpretations, so the fact that people think different things, but communication will be weak. Level 2, you understand the question. It is almost entirely descriptive with a few explicit links to the question, but limited support, so again it lacks details. Maybe that it's a limited understanding of differing historical interpretations, so without really explaining why people think different things, and again poorly structured. Level 3 is a developed understanding of the question, some assessment backed by relevant and appropriately selected evidence, so specific details to support your answer, but at times you may lack depth or balance. Some organisation of structure of the essay. Level 4 is where we start to see things improve a little bit. So they show explicit understanding of the question, they develop a balanced argument with a good range of material to support the points, a clear understanding of historical interpretations, and good written communication, so well structured and good use of language. And in level 5, it's a well-focused, closely argued answer, arguments supported by precise evidence leading to a relevant conclusion or judgment, incorporating well-developed understanding of historical interpretations and debate, so understanding why there are these different arguments. Should be carefully organised, well written, and including appropriate vocabulary. In the next part of the video, we're going to look at actually planning out your answer. So we need to first of all check your understanding again. So the question is, how successful were the Liberal social reforms in improving the lives of British people? And we know it's a 24 marker. In a how successful question, we're looking for balance. So you need to make sure you're looking at both sides of the debate, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. You need to be specific and actually name some Liberal social reforms. So you need to discuss them in detail, evaluate them, think about were they successful or not. In a 24 marker, you know that a judgment is needed, so you must be able to come to some conclusion and, where possible, support it with evidence. And finally, evaluate whether they really did improve people's lives or not, because that's what the question's asking you. So step 1 is really checking that you understand the question, and by breaking it down in this way, it's just getting to grips with what a 24 marker is actually asking you. In step 2, I recommend actually planning out an introduction. Now, a 24 mark answer really should have an introduction. It doesn't have to be very big, it should really be short and to the point. And in it you should outline the debate, because really if you want that level 5, we need to be showing the examiner that you understand the debate at hand. So in your introduction, set the scene. Think about what were the social problems at this time, you know, what was the issue at hand, perhaps provide a little bit of background to it. And most importantly, outline the debate. So for example, you could look at the fact that social reforms were successful to a certain extent, but perhaps didn't go far enough, and perhaps show the evidence for that. So have an idea, and if you write an introduction and you've got an idea of that debate, it makes a conclusion a lot more easier in the long run. Now, step 3 is looking at balance. So underneath you've got the table, and to continue with the X, Y and Z structure that you've been looking at in class, we're going to identify the X factor. Now, the X factor is always the factor that's given in the question. So in this case, it says Liberal social reforms were successful in improving the lives of the British people. That is your X factor. That's what you're going to have a look at. But on the counter side of the argument, you're going to argue that Liberal social reforms perhaps were not successful, so we're going to look at other factors, and this is where we get your Y and your Z factor. So you should have at least 2 other things that you're going to discuss. Now, the first point I'm going to think about is the Liberals themselves. So how successful were they? And really think about the fact that they listened to what people wanted and they acted in the best interests of the British public. So that would be a way to think about that, you know, something to consider. But also on the flip side of that, and I'll write it underneath, it says perhaps, and just be aware that maybe they were more concerned with voters rather than poverty. So think about, what was it a tactic as such? But you could argue that it was in the best interest for the people, therefore they were concerned with improving British people's lives. You could also consider about the fact that the 1906 and 7 Education Acts were successful in providing free school meals for children, and linked to that we see markedly improved health conditions in children, actually having access to those medical injections and free school meals, and really they're having a better quality of education. As a result of this improved health, we see that national efficiency actually improves. So we have stronger members of society, stronger soldiers, better, you know, more robust British people. Perhaps also one last one to consider is the fact that the Liberals actually start to consider vulnerable members of society, and some examples of this is the Workmen's Compensation Act, the Old Age Pension Act, the National Insurance Act. So they start to look after vulnerable members of society. Now let's have a look at the other factors. And the first point I want you to consider is the fact that some of the reforms that they introduced weren't really targeted or at everybody, and perhaps weren't very helpful. So let's look at the first one, old age pensions, and really it was restricted to those over 70. Now a lot of people, unfortunately due to poor health, didn't last that long, so they weren't able to access it. Liberals also failed to tackle slum housing nor abolish the poor law itself. So they're not taking on all social issues. The reform isn't perhaps extensive. And obviously we do see some improvements, but it's very slow. It's not across Britain. It's not entirely aimed at the entire British population. It's slow to roll out. And finally, even national insurance, which we said there was a good thing, it wasn't actually comprehensive until just before the outbreak of war in 1914. So you can see that although the Liberals do pass some excellent social reforms and it does have an impact, perhaps it doesn't go far enough. And then we have to think about their motivations. Now in step 4, this is where you should really plan out your judgment. So think about how you're going to conclude, and remember that you need to have evidence to support it. Just have an awareness that this is the first time that the Liberal government, in fact any government, had tackled social issues. So this idea of the laissez-faire attitude was diminishing, but it wasn't really affected overall, so poverty was still a problem. Now that's just my conclusion. You might have a slightly different one, but really from the evidence, you need to weigh up both sides of the debate. You weigh up the argument, you weigh up the factors, and you support your conclusion with evidence, specific evidence that will then get you the marks. Good luck in writing your answer, Year 12.
I'm the cat with the bass and drum, going around like bum bum bum. I'm the cat with the bass and drum, going around like bum bum bum. What's grooving? I'm moving. I like your style of lumping. How charming, just a rap, load in my